The guard riding the horse was finding it harder and harder to keep a straight face as a careless tourist from the US kept bothering his calm horse for a photo. He hoped someone would intervene and take her away, but what he didn't expect was for the horse to take matters into his own hooves. The animal got back at the clueless and disrespectful woman perfectly. As she annoyed the horse, he kept his eyes fixed on her, waiting for the right moment. And when she got close enough, it happened. Everyone gasped as they watched the horse get revenge on the woman, and nobody could stop it. Nobody could believe what just happened. People tried to hide their laughter, but it was hard. The horse's revenge was unexpected, but nobody was more surprised than the woman, who felt so embarrassed she tried to run away. She got what she deserved, making everyone happy. Even the royal guard chuckled quietly. But it wasn't finished. They had to go after her. She broke the rules after all. Who wanted the horse to get back at her? Why did she bother the animals? And why wouldn't the royal guard let her go? Then it was time for the royal guards to change shifts. People had been waiting at the United Kingdom Royal Palace for up to an hour, eager to take a picture. This had become a big tourist attraction, much to the annoyance of the guards. Tourists were a bother to them, but they could handle it. They were trained to handle annoyances, but the horses couldn't. Tourists showed no mercy to the animals, but they would soon regret it. One of the tourists gathered around was Margaret, a 32-year-old woman who was vacationing in the UK with her boyfriend Lyle. They had seen almost all the best places, and this was their final stop before flying back to the US. Taking a picture with the royal guard was one of Margaret's bucket list items that she wanted to complete. Margaret really wanted to get a picture of one of the royal guards, and she would do almost anything for it. One of those classic recognizable pictures would be the perfect souvenir to show her family, but she could have never imagined what it would lead to. Because of how unapologetically in their face the tourists had been getting lately, the royal guard had actually sectioned off the route they had to take daily so that the tourists could not get in their way. This also had to do with an incident that happened a couple of months prior. There had been a little girl left alone in the square while her mother was taking pictures of her with the royal guard approaching. But what the mother did not know was that the guards are not allowed to stop under march, and things went very wrong. This stupid woman had figured that it did not matter if she put her child in the way of the royal guard to get some pictures, because they would, of course, just stop or go around her. But this did not end well, something that angered the woman greatly. The royal guards stepped right on through the girl and almost kicked her out of the way, perhaps shouting that she needed to get out of the way from the moment they saw her. But when the mother did nothing to get her child, they had no other choice. This all led to a lot of complaints from the mother, witnesses, and the people who had seen the video on the internet. And while the royal guards were very much in their rights to do this, they just did not want the hassle anymore, and thus they put up the small barricades. But this did not always help. Margaret was at the front of the barrier, and she could already see how this distance from the royal guards could ruin her picture. She knew she was not allowed to get over, but there was just no other way. What were the guards going to do if she jumped the barrier? And so, as the clock struck 12, it was time for everything to be set in motion. The guards were ready to move into their position to take over the shift of their tired colleagues, the famous changing of the guards that everybody had been waiting for. The gates of the palace opened up, and the guards were greeted by the sight of dozens of cameras flashing in their faces. It was something that they would probably never get fully used to, nor did they really want to. Margaret got a few pictures, but none of them were good enough. That prompt was one guard on a horse, whose status traditionally was to lead the path for the other guards to follow. But unknown to the guard on the horse was that this was exactly what Margaret had been waiting for. One of those unrecognizably dressed royal guards on top of a beautiful horse. This was perfect for a picture. She knew that the rider would probably not get close enough to her to get a good picture. She just decided to do something very stupid without anybody there to stop her, and having handed the camera to her boyfriend, Margaret swiftly jumped over the barrier and wanted to make her way to the still very much unaware royal guards on horseback. But she was not the only one. When all the tourists saw Margaret jump the barriers, a lot of them figured that this was most likely something okay to do, or they figured that if the woman dared to do it, they would probably not get punished for doing the same. This set off a sort of chain reaction following Margaret's actions. Dozens of people suddenly jumped the barriers one by one and made their way to the gate where the rider had just emerged from. The royal guard had now very much noticed what was going on, that when the other guards came out to help push the people back, and while those same people were trying to take pictures with them, Margaret actually started helping the guards. They had no idea that she was the instigator, so maybe they would allow her to stay close to the entrance if she was helpful. And that is at least partly what happened, because Margaret was so helpful with getting the protesters behind the barrier, the guard even thanked her. She needed to go behind the barricades herself at the end, but the guards at least asked her where she stood, and Margaret lied to them that it was right near the entrance. She took a smug look as she stepped into the front line, raising eyebrows around her. Everyone had seen she didn't stand there in the first place, but no one dared to say something. They had already passed the guards off, even if it was Margaret's plan all along. She would sign to her boyfriend Lyle that he needed to get the camera ready. She knew what she was planning, and even though he did not fully agree with it, he knew better than to go against his wife. Behind the still closed doors, the royal guards were debating whether they should come out at all today. Maybe they should take more precautions and clear out the plaza. That was the only way that they could guarantee that they would not be mobbed again. They would also send out a statement to future tourists that their tough actions would actually carry consequences. But most of the guards were against these precautions mainly because of one reason: they were royal guards for crying out loud. They had been trained for years to do this job, and they were not going to be scared or deterred because of some overeager tourists. They want to just go out there as always, and when those people outside tried anything again, they would handle it with the appropriate amount of force and authority. They got back into the starting position, and when the doors opened up again, they were able to walk out to meet the crowd with confidence. They did make a little bit of a change, as the guard on horseback did not want to go at first this time until he took his place at the end of the queue. He still felt a bit upset and bothered by what happened before. He thought maybe if he didn't step forward this time, he wouldn't get as much attention. But he was wrong. When the guards marched out from the palace, the crowd seemed surprised. They were wondering where the guard on horseback was, the one they came to see. But at least this time, the tourists weren't climbing fences. The guards came out one by one, and tourists took lots of pictures. But that was it for now. Margaret was waiting near the exit, ready with her plans. She was surprised the guard on horseback didn't come out first. She worried he might not come out at all, ruining her picture. She was about to get angry, but then she saw the horse waiting in the distance. She realized he'd probably come out last, which might work for her, because nobody would expect it near the end either. Margaret waited patiently while the guard on horseback nervously moved forward with the line. It was almost his turn to come out, and he wasn't looking forward to it. Everyone was waiting for him. When he came out, cameras flashed at him. It didn't blind him anymore, but it distracted him enough that he couldn't see where Margaret was. He knew she was the one who caused trouble before, and he was afraid she might do it again. When he didn't see her right away, he hoped she had left or been taken away by other guards. He didn't know she was standing right next to him, almost being rewarded for what she did before. As soon as the horse had walked a couple of steps out from the front door, Margaret jumped over the barricade again. You would have to expect the guards to be prepared for this, and they were, but because they thought Margaret was there to help them, they had not been keeping their eyes on her. She had grabbed hold of the horse's leash before the guard even noticed she was there. She was already posing for the picture that Lyle was trying to take when the guard laid his eyes on her. He started to feel his blood boil. He could clearly see that his loyal horse was very much getting annoyed that this woman was holding him back, and at that moment, something snapped in the guard. He screamed at Margaret to get off his horse, but this seemed to be to no avail. Lyle hadn't let Margaret know he got a good photo because he needed to be fast. He was struggling with the camera, but Margaret wasn't in a hurry. She wouldn't let go of the horse until she got the perfect picture. Lyle knew he didn't have to explain if he physically hurt her, but he found another way to get back at her. Since she was holding onto the horse so tight, he decided to use it. He signaled the horse to move forward suddenly. The well-trained horse didn't hesitate. It caught Margaret off guard, and she fell flat on her face. While she tried to understand what happened, the horse got its revenge in a funny way. It happened that the horse was standing over her with its rear up, and it couldn't hold it in. The horse started to poop, and Margaret screamed as everyone watched. Even Lyle couldn't help but smile. Maybe this would teach his wife about respecting others. Lyle put the camera down as Margaret embarrassed herself, but many had expected something to happen when the guard yelled at her. They recorded the moment she got pooped on. Despite her pleas to delete the footage, people posted the videos online showing Margaret's embarrassment. Many videos also showed she was being selfish and deserved what happened. People laughed at Margaret online, and she felt ashamed of her actions. It helped her realize she'd been wrong and needed to change. She's trying to be a better person now, treating everyone with respect.